I'm sorry, I didn't hear Alan.
Good morning.
There you are.
Good morning.
So Jeff, are you recording? All right, so I would like to call this meeting of the Finance Committee to order. Today is Thursday, June 17th. Thank you to everyone who was hanging in with us as we had some technical difficulties due to computer updates this morning, and we have a makeshift camera working for us. Jeff, you might need to adjust that again. So present, we have John Cini and Deb Ritchie on Zoom. I'm not sure if they can be seen on the Zoom link, but they can be seen on the YouTube link. And we have Sarah Parent as well, and myself, Tara Uckman, Alan Adley, and Rich Rudel. So we'll begin with a review of the May 2020-2021 financial report. Mr. Rudel.
So this is the financial report through May. We are forecasting a year-end surplus of $1,259,659. This is about $134,000 higher than the previous month. The main changes include we have disencumbered some special education legal fees given our experience. Health insurance is about $40,000 better than the previous month, and that really is a product of less longevity payments anticipated, as well as dental insurance. We have disencumbered some additional district legal fees for about $19,000. Purchase orders are pretty much cut off at this point for the year, and so some supplies, materials, travel, dues, and fees have accumulated to about $17,000. We had a resignation in the copy center, which added $1,600, small amount in workers' comp, and then going in the other direction, clubs and councils is a small amount of $300, electricity about $1,700. An adjustment to special education tuition for $58,000, and then in the COVID bucket, a couple of salary saving days for campus monitor. The contracted cleaning on the weekends did end officially mid-May, so a little bit more there. And then we had a resignation of one of our LPNs late in April that won't be filled, and that $35,000 represents savings for the rest of the year. The breakdown between the ERCs, general education RCs make up about $423,000. Special education RCs make up $750,000, with about half of that being the additional excess cost funds. And then reopening expenditures, a positive $85,000, getting you to that $1.259 million. Going through the individual RCs, the only change at the high school is the textbooks, materials, periodicals, totaling about $451. Moving on to the middle school, a small amount of $216, and those again are in those small materials, periodicals, consumable accounts. In Hindley, a small amount of $132, and again, those small accounts, textbooks, classroom, reference periodicals, and professional development. Homes, 1,182 is new, and again, those are in those small accounts, textbooks, classroom reference periodicals. In Ox Ridge, the only new item is the $671 to the positive of textbooks, classroom reference, periodicals, and PD. Moving to Royal, again, similar accounts, $1,012 in textbooks, classroom reference, periodicals, and PD. Tokenique, the same, but only $78. RC11, small amount of savings in teaching supplies, consultants for about $368. In RC13, similar, those small accounts, classroom reference, professional development, dues, and fees, about $366. RC14, again, some of those smaller accounts for $438. RC15, what I flagged earlier in terms of the resignation of an individual in the copy center for $1,600. RC16, we have increased the available balance in the legal fee account to be $79,241. While this is the May report, we do have 2 months of legal fees to process. So if those continue to trend lower, that could potentially increase favorable balance there. RC17 health, some of those smaller accounts like travel and professional development, $717. In RC19, local travel is showing a savings of about $3,200, and this is just due to less itinerant travel. In RC21, again, some of those smaller accounts, sessions, periodicals, resource materials, totaling $8,700. In Tech Ed, RC22, it's again, some of those smaller accounts, like periodicals, saving about $150. Going into RC24, special education, as I mentioned earlier, we are forecasting a lower than budget legal fee account by about $47,000. And then some of those smaller accounts like professional development, local travel, dues and fees, $1,900. We did make an adjustment to tuition public schools. That decreased, but is still a positive of about 42,000. While this number didn't change, we do want to highlight we have received 100% of the reimbursement for excess cost. We did receive $2,695,922, which is $374,000 above budget and reflects a reimbursement rate of 80.31%, which would be one of the higher reimbursement rates in many years. Moving to RC 25 fixed. Health insurance is forecasted with a slight negative variance of 25,000. This is projected savings in vision insurance, and then again, as I mentioned earlier, longevity payments, and then dental claims, which we are self-insured for, did improve over the last month. And then RC 28, the COVID account, as I mentioned, we did have a resignation in the contracted LPN account, and so we are not planning to fill that, and that is a balance of 35,000. And then the contracted cleaning, we did end contracted cleaning on the weekends as of the 22nd, and that saved just shy of $33,000.
Okay, I have lots of questions, so I'm going to open it up to you guys first. Any questions on Zoom land? John or Deb?
I have one, or it's not a question. I just want to check my math. So when I net out the special appropriation, the additional COVID spending, and then any savings related to COVID and anywhere else, and any other adjustments in the budget, I come to a net deficit of 528,471.
Yep, that's correct.
Is that the right way to look at it,
Yep.
Rich?
So if you remove the 1.78 million appropriation, we would be in a deficit of just over $500,000.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Ritchie?
So I just wanted to, there's good detail here, Rich. So I just want, we haven't really talked about fiscal year 22. So just as we move into fiscal year 22, I'd be looking for information on ELP, and also I would love an update on where we are with Darien Summer School at this point in time. And then just on special ed, just where we are on PPTs. Have we seen them go up? Do we have more IEPs in place as a result? And just, a general update would be great on that. Thanks.
So I'm going to pick up, I have some broader questions, but I'm going to pick up on Mrs. Ritchie's question. If you look at our pupil evaluation line in special ed operating, it looks as if the last couple of months we've been trending about $40,000 worth of spends. We've increased our encumbrances this month. So it suggests to me that we're paying out of operating, or we had new bills. So do we have any? Did we? Am I right in reading that? And do we have any new bills, received bills, expected bills?
So for within that account, it's you typically see more expenditures in the beginning of the year, kind of a lull in the middle of the year, and then it picks up in that April, May, and June timeframe.
Yeah.
There are some new bills, which is one of the reasons why you're seeing that spend rate go up. In total, we don't expect any issue with that account for the end of the year. Shirley and her team have been having PPTs really for the last couple months. There is a balance there that's encumbered of 22, and then an available balance of 56, and we think we'll be okay for the rest of the year.
Okay, so last month we had encumbered 9. Now we're encumbering 22. So that's just
so part of what
based on our
part of what
PPTs.
the process is in special education is they wait until they have a contract, until they encumber the funds. And so while we might have some earmarked and it's sitting in the available balance, it doesn't get officially encumbered until they have an actual contract to move forward with it.
All right, so we're not actually encumbering until we have the contract in hand. Okay. And then, so when are we closing our books for June? Because we know sometimes we get a lag in invoices.
So typically we'll aim to have everything closed that first week in August. Part of that is the EFS report, which is a state report, is due September 1st. It typically takes about 3 weeks to complete from start to finish. You do get a lag in invoices. A good example is utilities. You consume electricity up till June 30th, but you don't get billed on June 30th. So there's a good month lag before you get all those bills. So we would expect that first week of August in that time frame to have it closed.
Okay, so we could see also additional changes to that surplus too, based on incoming invoices.
You could. I mean, we do have a pretty good handle in terms of what's actually we expect, so we don't expect any significant swings in those surpluses. The couple of accounts that we'll watch, which could end up being disencumbered, would be district legal fees. So like as I mentioned earlier, we have 2 months left, even though this is May. It is usually over a month in terms of arrears and shipment bills us. In the forecast, we've built a conservative amount, which is closer to what we spent in the beginning of the year. Towards the last probably 4 months, we've seen it really drop off to between $4,000 and $8,000 a month. If it's closer to that 4 and 8, we'll have more money in that account. Transportation within athletics is another area where we could disencumber some money. We're just holding back a little bit in case of some straggler bills that could come in. But other than that, we don't expect any significant swings in the forecast.
Okay, because the people evaluations is one that jumped out because we're encumbering more. It looks like we paid out of operating because we needed, and then we needed to encumbering more. So this may not be a fair question for you two, but are we done with all known or expected PPTs at this point? And I know a parent can request a PPT at any point, but do we know where we are in that schedule? Because that would adjust financials.
Yeah,
I don't want to speak for Shirley. I believe they were having PPTs even last week.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's
So,
even
but
some
I
this
don't want to
morning.
speak for Shirley.
Okay, all right, so we could see shifts there. Mrs. Parent?
No, you got it. Thank you.
So I have some bigger, broader questions because as I looked through this and I reached out yesterday about it, the financials have changed significantly in how we're reporting from May to June. And so can we talk a little bit about that? Because they are shifts in how we report. So if I need to know why we're making them, because it zeroes out our history.
So the history is still available. It's not zeroed out. So as we talked about in the last 2 budget processes.
Can I just make sure that, Madam Chairman, can just make sure everybody knows what we're talking about here in terms of where this is showing up? Just
Sure, it's showing up in a couple
just so-
places, but certainly the ones that stand out the most are the breakouts.
Yeah,
So
okay.
it looks as if, and this is as I was joking, while we were waiting for tech come on, I looked like a crazy person with my charts and graphs trying to figure this out. But it looks as if the administration is creating new lines. But then we need to show the corresponding transfer, or my understanding is we would show the corresponding transfer to the new line. So
Hey, Tara, could you call out the page that you're referring to for us?
so there's a bunch of them. If you look at the superintendent adjustments,
yeah, it's the accounting adjustments and the reconciliations.
yeah, so like department chairs might be one. The special education department chair, I think, is another one where you see a split between teacher.
On the right-hand side, it'll say breakout of accounts.
So those are actually creating new lines, independent lines, which may or may not be a bad thing, but they're new lines with no corresponding transfer. So when I go to true up against last year's appropriation, it's been difficult.
So as we
Yeah,
talked about in the last, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to say that I was also flagging that too, to talk about. I just didn't know when to talk about it, but that's something that came up to me when I was going through reconciliations.
So as we talked about in the last 2 budget processes, the state does have what's called the Uniform Chart of Accounts, which we were not in compliance with. If you recall, in the budget for this year, we asked for a certain amount of money to fix those chart of accounts. It ended up getting reconciled out when we got a reduction from the Board of Finance for fiscal 21. So we've been doing it systematically over a course of about a year. Some of the accounts are broken out like department chairs. So previously they're commingled with teacher salaries, for example. They're commingled with some stipends. When we file those year-end reports, we do have to have them segregated. And so what you have here is a breakout of things like department chairs, whether it's an RC1 or 2 or 3, excuse me, or special education. Part of the other portion of it is to align similar object codes. So in the previous chart of accounts, we had different object codes for what's called like an assistant director. They really need to have the same object code in order to have the uniform chart of accounts. So we started breaking out those accounts similar to what we did at the beginning of this year with campus monitors and teacher aides. Campus monitors were broken out within their individual account. So that process, has been taking about a year. The history is not lost. We still have the ability to shift history. We did not shift the history for this report because we just aren't at that point in time yet. The history really, when you're looking at the financial report, it's definitely more important for the budget process so that you can see those trailing histories. So for like department chairs, when you look at the financial report for fiscal 18, 19, and 20, you'll see the zeros in those accounts. You'll see the appropriation and then the revised budget, the year-to-date expenditures. The expense is still currently under curriculum supervision, which is where it was coded prior.
Yeah.
By the time you get the June report and then obviously the first financial report for fiscal 22, that history gets shifted up. So you'll see that trail going forward.
Okay, so my feeling on this is it makes it very difficult for the board to follow. And since we don't do the state chart of accounts, we do the budget. I think that we probably need a discussion, whether that happens here at the committee level, we can talk to the chair, whether that's at the full board, but it took hours of work to try to figure this out and it wasn't flagged anywhere. So I understand if you have a compliance issue, and I'm not saying it's the wrong way to do it by any means, but I'm saying for the board and for how I think in terms of transparency, how the Board of Finance actually sees our budget, how the RTM sees our budget, they're also not going to be able to track it without really a full, robust conversation about it and or at a minimum a flagging of what's going to happen and a reconciliation to truing up to our appropriation last year. So the state might require it one way and the town has looked at it another way, and maybe we need to marry those two. But this took hours of work and I don't know that everyone would have caught it unless they were looking for it. So I think we have to reconcile that somehow. Or at least we need to make public that this is what's going on. So when someone goes back to look for X, they know what they're looking at.
So I think from me here, a little notation in the memorandum, just to flag that the breakout sessions were there and what they're meant would have been, well, it certainly would have been helpful to you in terms of as you're looking at them preparing for today's meeting.
Well, my other concern, and sorry, Mr. Sini, I saw your hand. I'll get to you in 1 second. My other concern would be if the transfers don't show, how are we tracking the change?
Will they show in the adjustments that were included in the packet?
Yeah, but they don't show in the budget. So when we would literally have to go through all of your superintendent adjustments, put them into the budget. And so would the RTM and so would the Board of Finance, which is difficult.
It's not a transfer.
Right.
It is a line item change. So in Munis, you actually are able to just move the history, which is why you don't actually see it in the appropriation transfer.
So how would someone track it? Like if we have a big budget. So if someone wanted to track our budget, and people often talk about transfer, how would someone track a change like that?
It would be in the May accounting adjustments.
Okay, that's very difficult for an RTM member, a Board of Finance member. Mr. Sini.
Yeah, I mean, you're making a lot of assumptions here, I think, about what we do and don't understand. I think, Rich, thank you thanks for asking the question and clarifying it. But let me just follow up. I mean, you said it's going to be pretty clear in the next financial reporting, right, Rich? Or did I mishear you?
Yep. So, for example, in the curriculum supervision account, you'll see a portion of that 17, 18, 18, 19, and 19, 20 shift up to the department chair account.
I think my comment is I'd love to see the next report as all these adjustments are reflected in the history, and then we can work from there as a board whether or not we need further financial disclosure.
So I feel a little differently about it, in the sense that I think that if we're going to make changes like this, and big changes like this, that it should be flagged. I think that it will show, but as Mr. Rudel has said, you will need to go back to the May report, whoever you are, to go back. I think it should true up against our appropriation. And I think that if we're now seeing it in multiple accounts. So if we miss it in campus monitors or something like that earlier on in the year, but now that we're seeing it in some very expensive accounts and the money is moving around and the trail is difficult at best, I think we probably need a conversation on that. Any other questions before I move on? So I think that's going to answer what's going on with the SPED department chair, right? It's broken out
Same thing.
there. Sorry, I have a couple questions. Can we take a look at long-term subs? And the transfer in there, I see in the superintendent, we've jumped significantly. And it looks like we transferred in about $65,000. And I see in the superintendent approved adjustments, a $34,000 change. Am I missing the delta between those two?
You should not be. I think we also did one in the previous month that would be there. I mean, one of the reasons you're seeing adjustments into the long-term sub account, you have two different types of long-term subs. You have a long-term sub who's getting paid while the person they're covering for is also getting paid, which is why you have that established budget of 475. And then you have instances in which a long-term sub is getting paid, but the person they're covering for is not getting paid. And then funds have to be moved out of those accounts into the long-term sub account. It's really an accounting adjustment to reflect the long-term sub in the long-term sub account.
Okay, so there's a corresponding or I don't know if it's corresponding, $93,000 in special education teacher savings. Is that offset by a long-term sub bill, or is that just a pure savings?
That's a pure savings.
That's a pure, so that's a position we have not replaced,
Correct.
and we're still covering services.
Yes.
That's not Rich's. That's yours. Rich isn't responsible for
Yes,
that one.
yes.
Okay, so we're running this year at about $900,000 in long-term subs.
Yes. A significant portion of that is you did have a number of teachers who took leave of absences due to concerns of COVID.
Yeah. Okay, anyone else with questions?
I do, Tara. It's a
Mrs.
minor thing. Yeah, sorry. I don't know. I guess you can't see me, but I just wanted to talk about Epipens and I happen to be a parent of a child with an allergy. So are we purchasing them now? It seems like a strange time of year. They do have expiration dates. So I'm just wondering what was that movement about, and when do we usually acquire them?
Sure. There was additional Epipens purchase recommended by Alicia so that we would have some on hand for ESY.
Okay, so those are just specifically for ESY.
Yes.
And I'm just curious about the cost. Are we paying full cost for those Epipens?
That I would have to check into.
Yeah, I mean, I would think as a school district, there'd be some sort of discount. Epipens are extremely expensive, so I just wanted to flag that. Thanks.
Anyone else? Sorry, one other question. If we're going to go back to these chart of accounts, if we're going to do it the same way as the state has a chart of accounts, are we going back and truing up previous budgets at least to last July or the following July so that
You'd have 3 years of history.
but are we going back and doing it?
Yes, for 3 years of history.
So we're going to true up the chart of accounts for the previous 3 years and going forward.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Okay.
I'm sorry. Just on food services, it looks like that Rich, we're doing well and we had a great month and we are in a good position to start the school year with the current projected balance.
Yep. So the month of May was actually the best month the district had. It was about $7,500 a day, which is still lower than you would have in a normal year, but much better than we were starting the year at when we were about $2,000-3,000 a day. So the projected year-end balance does put us in a good position.
Thank you.
Okay. We will move on. I just want to stress, maybe I'll talk with the chair about next month's financials and making sure we're clear. We'll move on to the reopening of schools and projected expenditures.
So the reopening expenditures, the total spend is just shy of 3.6 million at 3.59. There were transfers previously of 810,000. We did receive that supplemental appropriation of 1.7. We received grants of just shy of 1.1. We do have a positive balance of 85,893. Those areas of savings are primarily some savings in the part-time custodians, the LPN that I mentioned earlier, some savings in lunch monitors from remote days that we've had throughout the year. And then again, with the cancellation of the weekend contract.
Questions?
Just to a request, just as we now close out, I guess we'll get a final report at some point on fiscal year 21, but as we move into fiscal year 22, I do appreciate the detail of reporting. So I hope that we can continue, especially as we're looking for this new grant and how we're going to spend that money. So Rich, kudos to you. Great job. And I hope as we continue into fiscal year 22, we continue with that same detailed reporting. It's very helpful. Thank you.
We'll have to do that anyway in terms of if we identify any COVID expenses.
And so, sorry, this will lead into our opening COVID and next year. When we passed the budget for next year, we did it in our prior way. So we will have to true up against the chart of accounts all over again for the incoming budget.
You would see them in the appropriated account. So I don't really understand what you're saying by true up.
So we'll have to take all these changes we're making. I assume this year we would do it in August or September.
Correct.
It'll rejigger the budget, just the lines.
Correct.
For what we actually approved.
Correct.
Right.
And we will need to sort through whether those are transfers or not. There will
They're
be a
not
conversation maybe for some people who feel one way or the other.
They're not transfers because they all stay within the same broad category.
Okay. Mr. Sini.
Yeah, I mean, these are simple adjustments that we will see the detail on within the categories. So I'm fully confident that our chief financial officer of the district will be very explicit in showing us those adjustments.
Thank you. I don't think it's
They're not
so simple.
transfers. They're not transfers. We have to be careful with our definitions. These are adjustments.
Yeah, I don't actually think it's so simple. I think that's why we're talking about it, but I appreciate that Rich is doing it well. I just want to make sure everyone recognizes the newness of this because it's not all that simple.
Yeah, I'm just underscoring the importance of using the right vocabulary when referring to these.
Any other questions? Okay. Moving on to budget transfers 2020, 2021.
So there are no transfers.
There are no transfers this month. Any public comment?
Good morning. If you would like to speak during public comment, please click the participants icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. When it is your turn to speak, the facilitator will identify you and announce you are unmuted for public comment. You will have up to 3 minutes to comment. There are no raised hands at this time.
All right, with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Sini so moves, Mrs. Parent seconds, all in favor, and that is unanimous.